Hello, hello. Okay, that works. Hi, everyone. I'm going to invite you to all take a seat, please. We're going to start the event very, very shortly. Remy, I can see you. You can take a seat. Okay, I understand this is late in the evening, and I'm probably, with this event, the last thing standing between you and the late evening drinks, so we'll be short and sweet for this session. So first of all, let me tell you how excited we are. It's very nice to see all of you. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this COP15 side event on making waves and implementing ocean action to achieve global targets. This event has been co-organized with the Ocean and Climate Platform, the UK government as chair of the Global Ocean Alliance with the support of the government of Canada. It's really exciting for us to be coordinating this and working again with the UK government because we had quite a blast, I have to say, when we prepared for COP26. So it's good to see that we have much support to raise the status of the ocean yet again in this forum. Maybe I should have started with this, but as you can read, my name is Lorelai Picourt. I'm the Executive Director of the Ocean and Climate Platform. I'm really happy to be here because to reflect on opportunities of blueing the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, because the name may have given it away, but the Ocean and Climate Platform, originally we were created to influence the climate negotiations. We were created to make sure that the ocean, its role in mitigating and adapting to climate change, was recognized in these international discussions in COP21 to make sure that the ocean was going to be included in the Paris Agreement. So 7 years later, to realize that we're now here at COP15 in Montreal to discuss yet again the ocean, but also the connections and the synergies among the different UN forums, connecting the dots, because the ocean sustains us all, connects us all, and we have this amazing community to do so. So I'm also quite excited because I'm seeing a lot of friendly faces, but also a lot of people that I don't know, actually. That's even better because it means that we're preaching beyond the choir a little bit. We're trying to really start walking the talk and getting these people to have an overall discussion on how to bridge, again, the climate regime, the biodiversity regime. And when we talk about the ocean, the whole governance is very fragmented. So how do we pull our heads together? So that's a little bit some of the discussions that we wanted to have today. And of course, we're getting towards the end of the negotiations. We have the ministerial segment that has started, so this event is very, very timely on identifying some of these opportunities and how can we do better, how can we ensure that we have an ambitious framework by the end of the week. So we have an amazing lineup of speakers. I won't be much longer. I just wanted to end my message tonight with, just a word on collaboration. Collaboration with parties. The role of parties here is, of course, we all know is absolutely detrimental. We count on the UK, we count on the Global Ocean Alliance to make sure that, they can advocate and secure this 30 by 30 target, that we make sure that we recognize all the impacts and drivers of biodiversity loss, and that, there are our voices in the negotiations. But it's also about collaboration across non-state actors, and that's all of us. And it's also extremely important that now, in the biodiversity discussions, we also have this space for non-state actors. We're here to raise the bar, to drive ambition, to be a little bit more fun sometimes as well, and also to hold our parties accountable for the commitments that they're making. So you can definitely count on us, the Ocean and Climate Platform, our members, all our partners here today, and it's my pleasure to call on my friends Mina Epps. Mina, you're the Global Ocean Director, and I'll give you a little bit of time if you want. I can continue. Good. That you will be moderating this session. So Mina, thank you so much for being here with us today. Please. Do you want to take it? Yeah?
So, yeah, you can all hear me. So thank you very much, Lorelai, for that, and to the Ocean Action Platform, Climate Platform. I think it's really delighted to see not only do we have that at UNFCCC, but also here at the COP. I think it's really exciting to see this development. And I can see we're all kind of ocean lovers here in the crowd. So I don't like to be alone here on the stage. So I'd like to invite up all the panelists, and we'll do the introduction for here. So please come and join me on stage. Where do we need? We need 3. There we go. So, yes, please have a seat. Yes. Welcome. Okay, great. So we're here today to talk about the ocean and how we are going to achieve the global targets for the ocean within the CBD Global Biodiversity Framework, but also kind of beyond. So I'm really pleased to have quite a diverse panel here, and it's quite a panel. So we are going to look at mainly like from the different perspective of your sectors, how can they support achieving these goals? And then look a little bit again further and also across the different ones. So without any further ado, I like to kind of introduce my panel as we go along. So if we start, we have Ambassador Prasad. Thank you very much for joining us. You are the permanent, you're in the New York UN permanent mission of the UN for Fiji. So very welcome, very nice to have you here with us. David Obura, also very welcome. You kind of represent also the scientist here in the room. You are the founding director of Cordio East Africa, and you've worked a lot on the science and policy interface and actually how to move forward and to get the science into the policy space. So very delighted, looking forward to that as well. Oh, hello. Welcome, very nice to have you. Turn around here. So we have Benj Sykes. Very good to have you here with us as well. And you are working for Ørsted. So we look forward to hearing a little bit more on that, and especially as we talk about kind of renewables as well and wind energy. So we're looking forward to hearing some of that perspective as well. And we have Melissa Garvey from the Nature Conservancy. But pleasure to have you here, and you've been working quite a lot in the kind of both the resource mobilization, but in terms of innovative finance. So we're really curious to hear about those different tools that you can share with us, because by the end of the day, we need resources and to kind of mobilize this. And last but not least, Dallas Smith. Very nice to have you with us, and you have a very cool title. You are a stewardess. You have a stewardship in terms of indigenous peoples led conservation, coastal conservation and marine. So again, very welcome to you as well, and to the whole audience. So thank you very much. So if we start maybe with you, David, if that's okay, I wanted to say, how do you, if you think about the work that you do as scientists, how do you feel that, your work, your sector, the scientists, how do they contribute to the global biodiversity framework, towards achieving these goals? And if you think about, you need indicators to measure them. So maybe you can first elaborate a little bit on that, and then the role of scientists in this. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mina. And it's great to be here with you all. Thank you for listening to us. So yes, I've invested quite a bit of time in the last few years as the GBF process has stretched over the last 3 years into the science inputs. I've been very involved in the IPBES community, and then also in the last 2 years putting together some information documents for SBSTA, the science and technical body for the convention, and then for the open-ended working group meetings through GeoBon and Future Earth. And I'm on the Future Earth body called the Earth Commission. But what we try to do is to actually have the science contribute to the process, as opposed to helping achieve the targets, is to help set the targets to begin with. And is the science strong enough to be able to do that and clear enough? It is a big challenge because we have to bridge from global levels down through regional and national to local levels as well. And there's a lot of challenges around doing that. It's hard to get consensus across all the different scientific groups about what the real state is. And that's always a bit distracting for policymakers and the media and the public, because of course when one science group says one thing, another science group says another, that can create uncertainty in the public domain. But I think a big part of what we try and do is to, rather than just write the results, which is what we do as scientists, is to participate in the processes and try and be part of the discussions in using the science and what ambition of targets is useful. So it's very much a part of being present. So, for example, being over here through the whole open-ended working group and the COP process to try and contribute where we can. Of course, there are many different issues that the decision makers are thinking about. And then the last thing, of course, is knowing where we're going and the monitoring framework and trying to help point out which variables and indicators are strong and informative in terms of understanding what actions need to be taken and how they're being implemented, and then the outcome of those actions on biodiversity. So are ecosystems or species declining? Have they bottomed out, or are they beginning to increase? And I think getting a strong level of understanding between the actions that we need to take and the complexity of actions, and is that producing a result, is one of the big challenges.
Yeah, so what I hear, scientific consensus is important, but it's a lot of work, first of all, in setting. They need to be science-based when you set the targets, but then following up, having those indicators. So can I ask you, which is the most difficult job? Setting the targets or the indicator for the targets?
Actually, setting the targets is the hardest. Getting agreement on the targets is the hardest. There are disagreements about indicators, but in the end, to be honest, you know, the parties will agree on certain headline indicators. We will continue to work as scientists on the other indicators that don't get selected, and we'll publish on those, and we'll hear about those. So even if they're not accepted as indicators, they will contribute to the knowledge and discussion and decision-making moving forward. So I think that part we can sort out over time. The hardest part is getting agreement on the right targets to have and the quantitative ambition that is really needed.
Getting an agreement on the targets, that's the hardest part. Yes. Well, an evolutionary psychologist once told me that, you know, if you don't, you can never reach a higher level of understanding if there's never been any disagreement. So that's, we're getting there. Thanks a lot, David. Ambassador Prasad, you know, you're from Fiji. You're from like an island state or a big ocean state. And could you tell us a little bit about, you know, the national commitment that Fiji has made, and what made you do it, and how do you think that making this commitment can actually rub off or serve as a champion for others to follow? I mean, what was your ambition when you set those targets and communicated it internationally?
Okay. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for letting me share this with such a distinguished panel.
Do you a little bit closer?
On Fiji's own ambition, look, there's nothing that comes naturally in our DNA to be ambitious for the sake of being ambitious. But as governments, you need to get the job done. And we know that protecting our oceans, on which our livelihood, our security, our well-being is dependent, is our fundamental self-interest, first and foremost. And in advancing that self-interest of ourselves, we have undertaken an approach to our 2.3 million square kilometers of oceans as a 100% managed area, within which we have made a firm commitment to protect 30% in a highly protected manner. And we have gone further in all the ways in which we can. For example, added a moratorium on seabed mining, and in the inner coastal areas, protecting inner shore areas through partnerships with local communities, etc. Not being too comfortable with that, because you can see, in democracies, policy swings can take place very, very easily. These are locked in our oceans policy. These are locked in our Climate Act. And so they are now as part of our book. So getting the job done is an important part of the way in which, as a government, we think about it. And that is the same perspective we bring to the CBD. We are not very excited by the language that CBD should be an ambitious CBD, that the post-2020 framework should be an ambitious one or a pragmatic one. The post-2020 framework should be one that gets the job done for the planet. And that is what I think leaders are here for, and that's what leaders should wrestle with, and that's what we should walk away with. And our people across the planet now, young people, civil society, indigenous groups, coastal communities, they're all saying that out of COP15, we must get the job done. And why is this so important? It is so important because we have now reached, we are so close to the planetary tipping points. We are probably inside the red zone already. And those of you who are saying, watching soccer, football, we are a rugby nation, so it doesn't mean we are not too excited by soccer. We are in the overtime zone. There are no penalty kick options to return the world to a planetary stability. And this is the most consequential of the CBD, of the biodiversity COPs we have ever had, because we have never made decisions so close to the planetary tipping point. So I really urge all of you to reach out to your member states to say that we must walk away with a CBD framework that gets the job done. And one part on the blue part of getting the job done is that we must walk away with the clearest of commitments in the biodiversity framework, as we are saying in the climate framework, of 30% of the world's ocean being highly protected, because it is that our scientists tell us, I'm a diplomat, the experts tell us, it is at 30% that the job gets done, not at 20%, not at 25.2%, not at 70%, that's probably too much. It's at 30% that we get the job done, that we return the planet to stability. We allow the oceans to restore and heal themselves. We allow them to restore the food security and livelihoods that we depend on it, and the fundamental ecological and environmental services that it provides to the planet as a whole. So I really hope and will urge member states and civil society and everyone in this COP21 in this overtime zone, let's get the job done, because there are no penalty kicks at the end of it.
All right. Well, you heard the ambassador. Hashtag get the job done, right? So we heard that loud and clear. Get the job done. Hashtag. So, but thank you very much, because I generally felt that that was a very sincere, you talked about the urgency. Fiji, as an island, that you're not doing it just to set targets for sake of publicity. You're doing this because you know it matters, and it is important, and it is urgent. So again, a call out here was really to get all of your, reach out to your kind of respective country delegations and make sure we get the job done. So thank you very much. I'm now going to move over to you, Dallas. You know, moving over to another stewardship. Do you think that the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, I mean, does it actually really offer opportunities for rights-based approaches, for just and equitable? Could you share a little bit your perspective and how you think, and the work that you do, how do you think that it actually helps to achieve, you know, these targets and global goals? Thanks.
No, thank you very much, and Gaelic Asla to the Mohawk community for allowing me into your territory to share some words today. I'd almost flip that around a little bit and say our rights and title are what drive that process going forward now. You know, First Nations, Indigenous people around the world have always sort of been at the pleasure of other forces, whether it be capitalistic, whether it be ecological. And what we've done in the Great Bear Rainforest is we've learned to sort of take control of our destiny. We've lived in the territories that we live in for 14,000 years. Science has caught up to our traditional ecological knowledge now, and that's given us the comfort to be able to plan appropriately. One of the challenges that we face is we have different jurisdictions of government claiming authority over our territories, and the priorities of those discussions around sustainability are always changing. The goalposts, as you will, are always sort of changing based on what political stripe of government may be in power. And that's where we come in, because we have exclusive jurisdiction to all the land, sea, and air resources around our traditional territories. And so there's a responsibility upon our communities to step forward with these values and show that Indigenous communities are a part of a healthy ecosystem as opposed to dependent on it. And so now that we've had the opportunity to build stewardship programs, we're able to both safeguard the ecological practice, do the data collection, and do the monitoring that's important, but we're also there to make sure that any economic opportunity is done in a sustainable fashion that manages to put more back into it than it takes out. And so it's going to be really exciting over the next years as Indigenous communities around the world connect with each other to share how we're achieving some of those milestones and some of that positive yardage going forward. And it's only through events like this where leaders come together to make commitments to each other where 30 by 30 becomes a real reality as opposed to a political catchphrase.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just realized as well, I didn't really explain where you're coming from. So Nanwakala's council, can you explain exactly what it is that you do for the audience who might not be familiar?
Yeah,
Thanks.
so we came together as Indigenous partners to protect our territories through land use planning processes. Governments of the day are always doing land use planning and they're always inviting public sector input, but First Nations had to win court cases to be able to come to the table. And so regional organizations like mine was formed, that and of the Great Bear first coastal nations of the Great Bear Sea. We work hand in hand to make sure that Indigenous voices are at a government to government level to make sure that we're part of those discussions around the setting of goalposts and goals and whatnot. And so it's really a useful collaboration of Indigenous communities that have built partnerships both with the environmental sector, the industrial sector that has stakeholder opportunities in our territories, but we've also worked with philanthropic foundations now to find a way to make conservation financing work and make it an actual real agenda item going forward where we can invest in protection and conservation values.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that's excellent. Please do keep up that work and share it, and I hope it's being replicated and elsewhere. Thank you. Melissa, you are joining us from TNC, the Nature Conservancy, and you are the Global Director of Ocean Protection. So that's a big job you have there. We also know that you worked a lot of innovative financing mechanism, debt swap, and you have shared here in other panels some excellent examples. Can you say a little bit how you think that actually contributes to kind of reaching or achieving the global targets across SDG 14, such as the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework once in place? Thanks.
Sure, thank you, Mina. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Okay. Well, first, I just want to thank you for the invitation to be here. It's an honor to have this esteemed group here in the audience, and a pleasure to be here talking with you all. But to answer your question specifically, Mina, what we have found is that one of the greatest barriers to achieving...
A little bit closer.
One of the greatest barriers to achieving this large-scale ocean conservation that I think we're all hoping to see come out of this event, one of the greatest barriers is simply funding. And we know that there's not any single source that's going to be able to achieve the resources that are needed to fully conserve the ocean as it really needs to be. And so that's why the Nature Conservancy has developed what we call our Blue Bonds for Ocean Conservation strategy, which is really a way that we're working with governments to help them refinance their sovereign debt and do that in support of large-scale ocean commitments. And just a couple quick examples. There's often finance people in the room or scientists in the room, conservationists, and what I find is that there's usually a misunderstanding about sort of the multiple parts of this work. That we're speaking different languages to each other when we talk about finance and ocean conservation. But to really just simplify it, for anyone who maybe owns a house, you might think about the extent to which you might have a mortgage. And if you were to refinance that mortgage and put the cost savings into something that's beneficial, say solar panels on your roof, you can kind of understand the work that we're doing with governments. So the concept is to have there be the ability to show the way that conservation can be done on a large scale and demonstrate that through projects and work with governments to help them achieve their goals. The way that we do these projects, we work with governments in support of their commitments to protect 30% of their ocean. we work with partners like the Inter-American Development Bank or DFC, the Development Finance Corporation, to de-risk projects, to basically bring in others that can be guarantors of any of the lending, so that we can have there be either longer repayment periods or lower interest rates. And we're able to then put that cost saving into supporting marine conservation. But that's just part of it. You know, the conservation commitments that are part of all of these projects, we require that there be marine spatial planning, so that stakeholders have a seat at the table, so that rights holders have a seat at the table in designing and using these multi-objective planning processes, and bring science to help design what the protected areas should look like, and ensure that they can be effectively implemented, and that they have the buy-in of the communities and industry, that everyone's at the table in designing those new protections. The next step, though, is to ensure that there's also an effective governance structure for any of those resources to be managed and to be disseminated. And that's why all of the projects also have effective conservation trust funds associated with them, so that we can ensure that there's transparency and that there is a facility that can be both, you know, managing and disseminating funds that's independent of the government, but that can also be used to crowd in other funding, other public funding, other private philanthropy. So the idea is to, you know, create a structure, unlock these funds, put the science behind it, and have there be the platform to bring in additional resources. We've now done these projects in 3 countries. We started in Seychelles in 2016. With the first project, we accomplished the opportunity to be protecting about 400,000 square kilometers of ocean. We're really excited about that enormous conservation win for the ocean. We then did the next project a year ago in Belize, where we worked with the government and helped them to be able to refinance over $550 million of debt and unlock $180 million in support of marine conservation. The Marine Spatial Plan kicked off just a month ago, so we're excited for that to take shape and to be building and supporting Belize as they are really trying to achieve that 30% ocean protection goals. And then most recently, we completed a project in September in Barbados, and that was in partnership with the Inter-American Development Bank. We worked on a project, it was a $150 million debt refinancing project, and we've unlocked $50 million in support of marine conservation in Barbados. And again, that marine spatial planning process is just kicking off as well. These are just 3 examples and just one approach that we hope can show, you know, a path for financing that large-scale conservation and show that there's hope. These 30% protection targets, they maybe the word ambitious is the wrong one, Ambassador, but it shows that it's achievable. And that's what we're hoping to both demonstrate with these prior projects, and also help governments, help stakeholders, help, you know, the larger ocean community be able to achieve those conservation goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you're already starting to talk about these very specific projects, and I think that's, you know, we need to have good, successful projects that can work, and we believe in the power of good examples. And I understand that there's several different steps involved. You also alluded to kind of partnership is key. But when you start talking about multilateral development banks or multilateral funds, it started, you know, it's easy to get the feeling that it's not as accessible. You know, so is it for kind of local communities, whatever? How do you actually access, I mean, how do you break down those barriers?
Yeah, so, you know, the work that we do on the financing, it really is a relationship with governments, banks, and any of the development banks. But that doesn't mean that communities and stakeholders don't have a role. They absolutely do. They are actively engaged in the development of any of the protected areas through the marine spatial planning. And that's the place where you can bring those voices to the table in both designing the protected areas, but then also the next step is, as those funds are actually distributed, they're distributed to, whether it's, you know, through grant programs to community groups, as well as any of the, you know, some of government needs for any of the implementation and protection activities themselves, management activities. So, you know, there's kind of multiple different ways that these projects engage multiple different partners, and they're also critically important because this work can't be done by just one sector, and we really need to
It sounds like
ensure-
there's a little bit something for everyone in there, all the different kind of stakeholder groups. So congratulations on those successful examples, and we wish to see a bit more of them. When you talk about also the blue economy, for example, they really talk about, you know, not only our blue natural capital, but also kind of renewable marine energy, the blue foods, etc. So why don't, given that, you know, you are working for Ørsted, and why don't you talk a little bit about renewable marine energy and how that can actually help achieve these targets? Welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much. And what a fantastic panel. I feel slightly in awe of my colleagues up here. I will do my best to bring a very different perspective on an opportunity, certainly as we see it, to bring together the climate challenge and the biodiversity challenge and attract capital into biodiversity action as well as climate action. You probably haven't heard of Ørsted. We are one of the world's biggest renewable energy developers, and we are particularly into offshore wind, which is why it's so great to be talking about ocean panels today, with the ocean team today. And we've got around 30 offshore wind farms we've built around the world, from Taiwan through Europe over. We've got one wind farm in North America as well, hopefully more to come. We're very passionate about our mission, which is to create a world that runs entirely on green energy, but we recognize that we have to do, and actually we want to do, more than simply, not so simple, solely deliver an energy transition. We're very keen on science, David, and then science-based targets. So in terms of our emissions reduction, we're on a great pathway with our Scope 1 and 2 delivered in the next 2 years. And Scope 3 by 2040. It's a lot harder, and those have all been signed off by the SBTi, which I think we're the only energy company that's done that. So we're really slightly geeky. We like to be held accountable against the science. But we absolutely recognize that sustainable ocean stewardship, it's core to us. It's something that we need to take action on in our business. So we're just one player in this industry, and just to put into context what we expect will happen if we get this right. At the moment, there's 70 gigawatts, don't worry about the units, of offshore wind. The IRENA reckons we need 2,000 gigawatts of offshore wind if we've got a chance of hitting net zero by 2050. That is an enormous scale-up of renewable energy in our oceans. So it's absolutely vital that we do this in a way that, I'm not going to say nature positive, I'm going to use a slightly more geeky phrase, that we have set an ambition that all of our projects from 2030 will have a net positive biodiversity impact where we build them. And so, David, I'm hoping that you will help us figure out how to measure that, because one of the things we want to do, and we've got a lot of work we're already doing to define how on earth you measure this, because if you can't measure it, you can't demonstrate it. If you can't demonstrate it, we'll have a bunch of other people saying, oh, we've done it too. So we're very keen to make sure that this is properly defined. So we've got a team working on that, but we're also working on how on earth you actually deliver biodiversity net positive outcomes. So we've got a bunch of projects running, and apologies if you sat in any of my other talks, some of this will sound familiar. Just a few examples of the kinds of things that we're doing. In Taiwan, we've got a project that we've just kicked off earlier this year. It's an attempt to grow coral larvae to maturity by fixing them to the legs of wind turbines in the Strait of Taiwan. Highly experimental. We harvested those coral larvae from one of the beaches where they wash up during the spawning phase. We've designed, we're working with local scientists, communities. We've figured out a way of holding them up against the legs of the turbines. It's a great environment to grow them. The temperature is very stable. So we hope that we will reach, they will reach maturity, and then we can figure out, do we continue to grow them on the turbines? Do we try and take them back to shallow water and start to restore some of the damaged coral in that region? Something completely different in Denmark. We're we've done 3D printing of reefs, a bit of a wild idea. Each one weighs a ton, so it's a very big printer. But what it's enabled us to do is to print in a way that gives you the maximum benefit for the target species, which in this case is cod, because cod stocks are hugely stressed in the North Sea and in the Northwest Europe seas more generally. So what we want to do is create a haven for juvenile cod. So we've been able to design these things in a way where they're optimized for the juvenile cod to be able to stay safe from their predators. And then in the Humber in the UK, one of the most polluted estuaries, certainly in the UK and probably across much of Europe actually, we're doing a big restoration project. We're planting seagrass to see how that gets on. We're putting in 500,000 native oysters to build a biogenic reef. And crucially, we're also working on restoring salt marsh, which is a crucial coastal habitat, certainly where I live, not only vital for providing ecosystem services, but also protecting the coastal areas as sea levels rise. So there's just 3 examples of the kind of things we're doing. So we really want to push this because that scale-up of offshore wind that I mentioned represents $5 trillion of investment. If we can repurpose some of that $5 trillion into economically attractive solutions for biodiversity, what's not to like? Clearly, there are places where we shouldn't be building offshore wind, as well as places where we should. And I think the marine spatial planning point that you made earlier is vital. We need to very much work with local communities. In our case, they are typically in coastal communities that are seriously economically challenged. We're doing some great and exciting things in the Humber with Grimsby, where we've started to help transform that town, just as one example. I know I've gone on a bit, but I just want to say one thing, that none of this works if we don't make businesses accountable. And part of that is mandatory disclosure. So I don't know where that's got to, but I would really just urge anyone who can make this happen to make sure that we have a robust system. The other thing I'd like to say is, if you want this, then policymakers and governments need to ask for it. We need to build lots of renewable energy if we're going to stop the trajectory on global heating. But with the way we need to do that, we need to be tasked and we need to be challenged as an industry to come together and figure out how we can deliver better solutions for the communities, better solutions for the environment, as well as delivering cheap, clean energy. So getting the right criteria for this build-out is absolutely key.
Wow, that was a lot there, a lot more than just offshore wind. So yeah, fascinating. So think about it. I think that probably raised a lot of question, a bit thought-provocative at least. So I'm hoping you're all preparing your questions there, which I'd like to move into quite shortly, because you've now heard a little bit about from different sectors. I mean, you've heard about indigenous-led conservation, that stewardship, basically from the role of the private sector, but not just in terms of the producing offshore wind, but also potentially other kind of contributions as well. And then the importance of having science, both in kind of designing and setting the target, but more importantly, the indicator and measuring it. We hope it will be all measurable and manageable. But at the end of the day, these kind of global committed, it all comes down in the end to national implementation. So we've heard about also some good examples they wish it. So before we open up for questions, I thought we could maybe give a little bit of thought. I don't know who would like to answer this question, but it's more about, now we talked about it in relation to the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, but do you think that it's possible, or how can we contribute to building bridges between international fora? If you think about the United Nations framework for climate change, a convention on climate change, the UNFCCC, or even WTO, and there's also the BBNJ, which is, all that see beyond national jurisdiction. So anyone would like to share a little bit in terms of how you think that we can build those bridges? You'd like to start? Go ahead.
Yep, I'd love to talk about that. Thanks, Mina. That's one of my favorite topics right now. And I think the thing is, it's clear that we have to do it. There's already such a strong dialogue between the nature and the climate conventions now in communities. Of course, it needs to get stronger and improve because they are so dependent on each other in terms of succeeding. But I think the Sustainable Development Goals are the perfect expression of that at the international level. And for example, we in the nature positive and the conservation community, we are sitting in goal 14, right? But goal 14 doesn't exist in isolation. And all of the solutions that we may have in relation to the ocean connect with all of the other goals. So we have to look from our goal to the others to see what can be done. Energy, climate, communities, equity across countries, food security, health, economy, jobs, sustainable production, consumption. So we have to connect across all of them. And that's already built into the global biodiversity framework. When you look at the various targets that we have, and there are 22 now, 23, many of them do focus on biodiversity, of course. So numbers, 2 through 10 pretty much focus on biodiversity. But once you go from 9 and above, they're focused on jobs. They're focused on production or consumption, subsidies, finance, rights, and responsibilities. So the framework itself is integrated across the different sectors that we need to address and with the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think we just need to think more strategically about how we do that so that we really plan that into the process and do it effectively.
Yeah, that's all the different sectors, but then how, into the kind of different multilateral environmental agreements?
So they need to talk to each other. So there are discussions about should they all be together, but with the complexity of this convention, and if you've been to the UNFCCC and know how complex that is, scope to deal with these two together in the same space is probably very limited. And to do food, and to do trade and WTO, all those discussions. So I think they do need to sit apart so that within those sectors we know how we need to deal and connect to the other sectors. We just have to make sure those connections are very much designed into the system as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe over to you, Ambassador Prasad. From a government perspective, I often hear from kind of small island development state in terms of, the capacity, because there's many different multilateral environmental agreements. And, how do you see, how can you actually build bridges and both capacity and bridges between these international fora?
Okay, so first, I think just to
closer,
preface it, 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming for many is a red line. For small island states is the lifeline. And we now know that there is no pathway left to 1.5 in which nature and ocean are not at the heart of it, and they are not today. So if we want to secure the planet at 1.5, we have to pursue in every forum possible the notion that nature and biodiversity and ocean are right at the center stage of our actions. And this is the fundamental connection that we need to make. Beyond 1.5 is not a future that as small island states we contemplate. We can't think about it. It's beyond our imagination and what it means. There are things, countries such as Tuvalu are thinking of existing as a digital state that simply ceases to exist, and no one should have to be contemplating these type of futures. But even at 1.5, in and across the Pacific, between 30 to 70% of our land-based economies are gone, even at 1.5. That is the last compromise possible by some of the smaller, or many of the small island states. So that's one point about the interface. The second, if I can make it to, is that also do not undervalue the outsized contribution that small states make. We recognize that protecting the ocean, for example, is in our self-interest. We also recognize it's in our DNA that protecting the planet is in our self-interest as well. So when a small country such as Kiribati, where you have walked and several people have walked, gives up 500,000 square miles as highly protected marine area for a country that is solely dependent on tuna. So tuna is Kiribati's oil, and gives up 20% of its revenues as a consequence. It is asking Canada to shut down its entire oil field, or asking Saudi Arabia to shut down 20% of its oil. And this is the scale of outsized contribution that small states are making, because we also want to set examples that everyone must do. It is no longer time to do their fair share. Everyone must do more than their fair share. But this is not an excuse. Let this not be an excuse when Fiji sets aside 30% of its tuna industry by having a highly marine protected area. It does not give you the leeway to restart Cumbria, for example. That can't be. It is small island states are giving others who are in need for just transition reasonable time to make that just transition by providing the outsized contribution that they still can make. And I think that's a fair deal to ask for, but I don't think that's fully appreciated.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. As I say, you're off the hook. You can actually go straight into the plenary room. They need to hear you right in there, loud and loud. I think we really heard about, the red lines and the lifelines. So very, very clear and comprehensive. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, you really talked about a shared responsibility. And you mentioned the SDG 14, and I think in 2015, that's when the world came together and really united on a unified language, whether it's business, public, and what we all can do as a shared responsibility. So again, very, very briefly, because we have to open up for question. So Benj, I mean, in terms of the private sector, and can you see, is there anything there to say, okay, but make it easy for us, so something you can walk across these different, or do you see any synergies there between the different MEAs, whether it's the COP for biodiversity, COP for climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I sit outside all of this multilateral global negotiation, and I'm really glad there are other people doing it. I see one of them in the room. Thank you, James. But seriously, we do need to somehow, and I don't know how. What I would like to see, I suppose I'm a recipient of all of this great work. I would like to see much more integration. I would like to see, if we don't already have it, a high-level champion for biodiversity in the same way we've really seen the transformation of the non-state actor space through the high-level champion for climate. I think that's been really powerful. I think we need to create more dialogues about the intersection of where business is taking action and what communities and what societies are looking to get. And I think both the Ambassador and Dallas have made that very clear. But I just want to get on with it, actually. We are taking action as a company now. Our industry is sort of waking up to this. What's going to make it move faster and start to deliver? I think it is clarity on expectations from our customer. Our customer is society. It's the governments that represent that society. So come on, step up and tell us what we need to do to meet your society's needs, because we're ready to do it. Get some good frameworks, science-based frameworks, so there isn't any gaming. There's one little thing I quite like, which is to end this $1.8 trillion a year of harmful subsidies, and maybe even shift 15–20% of that onto helpful subsidies. I could go on, but others need to speak.
I think we need to, yes, give him an applause. I think we also want to hear some kind of final remarks as well from you in terms of these synergies between, and there's indigenous-led approaches to climate change, biodiversity. What do you see in terms of synergies and, how you can actually make things more efficient and get the job done?
I think what everybody's saying here is just getting down to it. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. I think there's a lot of progress that's been made that we can start to build policy around, meaningful policy that still heads us in that right direction. But to continue the consensus, you got to keep the discussion moving and flowing, and taking sides on this versus that has really stunted things in the part of the world that I live in. And it wasn't until we came in and said, okay, let's start behaving like adults here and have a real meaningful conversation. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be tough, but you have to go into that uncomfortable space to be able to get that result. To make that change from status quo, everybody has to get a little uncomfortable.
Okay, getting out of your comfort zone. Be brave, creative, and bold, as well as visionary. So, Melissa, one thing I was thinking about is that it doesn't really matter if it's the BBNJ or a global treaty on plastic, because by the end of the day, whether to implementation cost money, they're all talking about resource mobilization. But quite often, the finance mechanism is just how much money are you going to put in on the table. But there's also a role to think like much further and be creative in that space. Do you feel is there anything there? Do you have a wish list? Like, should you all gather at one place? I mean, what do you think?
You know, I think my wish list is that we can have all these various sectors actually understand what the other's talking about and work together, right? So that's, I am a very optimistic person, but I'm also pragmatic. And, you know, just to be really clear, one of the things that I want to see more of is just better understanding the enabling conditions. Industry needs to have certainty on what the targets are, right? The communities need to have certainty on like finance and ability to participate. And what I'm finding in projects is as we go to countries and when they say that they're interested in protecting 30% of their ocean, they don't have any idea what that's going to cost, right? And so how do we find the right financing mechanisms to get them there? And one thing I do want to plug, my team would be very unhappy if I didn't. We just put out a white paper on a new costing framework because we know there's these global numbers on what biodiversity financing takes, but you need to bring that down to the country level and be able to talk with the decision makers in any individual place. So I've got postcards with QR codes, happy to share them because I think it's just important that we start being able to be practical and talk to people about their immediate needs. What are the costs of implementation and management of protected areas, but also what are the benefits over the long term so that we can think about how to get to that new future.
Thank you very much. Never miss a marketing opportunity. That is important. So on that note, I want to invite you all to come to Vancouver for the International Marine Protected Area Congress. That's my promo piece, where it really has a focus on First Nation and Indigenous-led community conservation. So I think that's really, really interesting. It's the first time an International Marine Protected Area Congress have had that as a one main theme. Okay, so do we have any questions here in the audience? I've been quite naughty. I've been asking you questions for our own benefit. So we're going to, I don't know if we have anyone going with microphones, or we could probably take one or two questions. Time-wise? Okay, going once. Twice, three, the gavel goes down. So, well, I think we should definitely start as well by giving this excellent panel a great round of applause. And we can continue for the audience as well, because you've been patient, and we were trying to wrap it up, as we never know at this hour when you will be overwhelmed by loud music. So this event, again, we're very grateful that it was organized and hosted by the Global Ocean Alliance, the Ocean Climate Platform, and the Government of UK. So I think on that note, it's very timely that we can still stay in our seats. I think that's fine. And then we will invite James Smith, Ambassador James Smith, up to the podium. Is there a microphone for you there? That you can give us some concluding remark. You're the Deputy Director of International Affairs at DEFRA. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And firstly, what a huge honour to be amongst such distinguished panellists and speakers. And what a great session. I think, you know, hearing the passion and the diverse range of experience, I think is absolutely a reflective of the approach that actually will be so important this week and indeed going forward as we come together to tackle many challenges that the ocean faces. The fact that the Global Biodiversity Framework and action are key, and we are not short of champions to lead the charge. The essential role of science to underpin how we develop the targets, the actions, the assessments that we need to take, the enabling environment, that innovative finance, the insurance mechanisms to unlock that investment, and then inclusion and equity every step of the way. We're all acutely aware of the multiple threats that we face for the ocean. I won't dwell on those. IUU fishing, overexploitation, impact of climate change, pollution, we all know them really well. And combined with the challenging negotiations that we're facing underway at the moment, it's no small task to navigate our way through. But we now have so many voices in agreement that there can be no thriving planet, no ecosystem services without a healthy, resilient and biodiverse ocean. And we've heard some fantastic insights into the ways that a global biodiversity framework can not only provide the path to put nature on that road to recovery, but to go on and deliver that ambition, or to just get the job done. We've heard about the critical role of science to set and then drive the delivery, and how essential it is to strive for synergies across those UN frameworks, which I completely agree. We've heard how innovative finance can unlock the solutions for that sustainable implementation of the global biodiversity framework and the targets. We've heard how large ocean states are showing amazing leadership here, alongside those local and indigenous communities and we not only need to respect the role of traditional knowledge, but actually keep it and maintain it at the heart of the actions that we're doing. And we heard about the importance of course, a holistic approach to sustainable management, marine spatial planning, getting net positive biodiversity impacts built into what we're doing, and really fostering that sense of stewardship across all the sectors engaged in our blue economies. So it's really clear, I think, that the ocean can provide the solutions we need, but only if we give it a chance. And that means building on the momentum that we've already created coming into Montreal, from putting nature at the heart of the climate COP26 and through COP27, establishing the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, through which we can spotlight the role of data, evidence and expertise to further increase our understanding of the vital services that the ocean provides and make sure our actions are putting us on a path to recovery. Indeed, just this week I've heard people say how science can help turn the impossible into the possible. And whilst we should draw optimism from this, it is up to us all to be the ocean champions, to set and communicate, I think, as we've heard, what we need for the ocean, and crucially, how we'll ensure that the science and the breadth of expertise and our resource is used to help deliver that vision and get on with it. And we're committed to playing our part in the UK, with 38% of UK waters now under MPAs, marine protected areas, contributing to that global 30 by 30 ambition. And through our Blue Belt programme, extending that MPA coverage across over 4 million square kilometres of the UK marine estate. And also overseas through our Blue Planet Fund, we're now working in partnership with least developed countries to protect the marine environment, and in doing so to continue strengthening the blue economies that are so important for the millions of people whose livelihoods depend on the ocean. And with this work, we're again seeing firsthand how our global ocean community is again leading the way, including small island developing states, valuing and accounting for ocean assets, championing local approaches to marine protection, and bringing to the fore the key role of nature-based solutions, whether that be corals, mangroves, seagrass, or salt marsh. And this goes hand in hand with the progress on innovation, blended finance frameworks, insurance mechanisms that can support the ocean sustainably, and helping to mobilize the absolutely required resource from public, private, and philanthropic sectors. But it's here in Montreal that we have a unique moment, a chance to take that significant step forward to a much-needed Paris moment for nature. So in keeping with the messages shared by many of us here at COP15, I ask that we all keep pushing for ambitious, effective and meaningful targets this week, with the ocean at our heart. The opportunity is now. We need to keep championing the ocean now. The outcomes we need are within our grasp now, to set us on the right path to 2030 and beyond. And with that, my sincere thanks to the Ocean Climate Platform for co-hosting this event, to our panelists for sharing what is immense insight and experience with us today, and to you all for your support. Thank you. I wish you all the very best for the rest of your visit here at COP15, and a plug also for the dedicated discussions on the ocean and science that we will hold tomorrow at the IOC UNESCO Ocean Action Day, starting at 8:30 just across the way. So with that, thank you so much everyone for listening, and all the very best.
Thank you. So, group photo, yeah, so thank you very much. Excellent remark. Thank you, Ron. Should we do a group photo now? But since we're so inclusive, anyone who wants to be in the picture can be in the picture. Yeah, go on. We're so inclusive. Anyone who wants to be in the picture.
thank you. That was really. I just do it. Just do it. We get started, and then we'll.